Good day, class, and once again welcome to our video lecture for today. So we are going to discuss the denudation process. And denudation, we should note that denudation is actually the weathering, mass movements, and erosion. So we had actually discussed some information on the weathering process, particularly on chemical and physical weathering. So let us move on to our uh, intended learning outcomes, where we had already finished some of this list here. We have distinguished the exogenetic and endogenetic processes, and we have recognized the different geological agents, then described the geomorphic processes, and here we are going to expand that. And of course, today we are going to explain the process of denudation. So we should also illustrate the denudation, degradation, and aggradation process, and of course the triggering factors in biological weathering, because we have already finished physical and chemical weathering last time. And then by and by I will upload a video, a supplement for you, for your appreciation in the formation of valley and the formation of river. So from the list here in the diagram, we are almost done with the exogenetic and endogenetic process. So today our concentration is the denudation process. So let us note here that the denudation process composes of three activities. We have the weathering, erosion or degradation, and then the transportation. So this is actually the processes wherein there will be a new land formation because of the denudation process. So let us have now the biological weathering. So this is actually the continuation of the types of weathering. So this is the third one, the biological weathering. So biological, of course, it is caused by the living organisms, including human activities. Okay, so it could lead to physical breakdown of rock. So that is termed as biophysical. And from that, biological weathering could also have a chemical attack, or that is a biochemical weathering. So I hope you can distinguish biophysical and biochemical weathering to that of the physical and chemical weathering. So meaning bio is being attached to the word, so it simply means the interaction of the living organisms. And once these living organisms will become dead, of course, the decomposition process, it will have an effect to the weathering process. So it is further categorized into three. Okay, so biophysical weathering is by plants' roots, by animals such as rodents and earthworms. So rodents are animals that tend to burrow or make holes or tunnels on the ground. Okay, and then of course human activities. So first we have by plant roots. Of course, this was already discussed in the physical weathering, wherein we have termed this as the root wedging. Okay, so when your root will expand, it will penetrate some rocks, and then causing it to crack, and it will break the rocks apart. So this was included in biophysical because we should account this more on a living organisms. So here is an example. Okay. So by animals, so as I have said, there are rodents that tends to build their homes underneath the soil. So it helped to widen and loosen the joints in the rocks and expose underlying rocks to weathering processes as they burrow through the ground. And then part of the biophysical is the human activities. Of course, this will have a greater effect on the alteration of our geologic material. So, of course, the construction and mining activities, and then the clearing of the land for cultivation will certainly affect the initial stability of your material, especially when the material is, or the geomorphological characteristics is a slope. Okay, once you disturb a slope, of course it will continue to fail, so it will be a triggering factor, so much yung human activities, ano. So these activities break up rocks and expose them to the weathering. So yung mga clearing activities, of course it includes uh, removal of vegetation, cutting of slopes, and then excavation. So those are big factors that tends to affect our weathering process. So that will fall under biophysical weathering. And for the biochemical, of course, dead plants or animals can help decompose rocks because it will form an organic acid. Okay, and chelation is the term in that effect. So waste and organic acids from dead animals help to weather rocks chemically. So acids will tend to alter the chemical composition of the minerals from rocks. And of course, part of the biochemical is the human activities also. So industrialization, of course, will pollute the air. And remember the formation of acid rain. It will emanate from the harmful gas emitted from various sources like industrial plants, machineries, transportation. So those are really harmful because it will accumulate and form an acid rain. And we have discussed the effect of acid rain in the chemical weathering process. Okay, so it states here hydrolysis, carbonation, and solution. We have already discussed this. Hydrolysis is just the interaction of hydrogen ions, and then carbonation is the interaction of the carbonic ions or the carbonic acids and solutions, wherein some of the mineral or chemical components of the mineral will tend to be dissolved because of acid contents. Okay, so geomorphology, redefined here in the slide, is just simply the formation of land because of those mentioned factors. Okay, so what are the processes work behind the landforms? With already discussed the weathering process. Actually, the weathering process is the first stage in the denudation process, wherein the material will separate from the original material. Okay, so it is the detachment of some material. Okay, so we have here the agents of geomorphological process. We had actually introduced this because the list here are just the geological agents. Okay, so the river activities will have an effect, and it will have a humid geomorphic environment. In the wind activities, we have an arid geomorphic environment, and the glacier activities will have glacial and periglacial geomorphic environment, as well as the wave activities. We have marine and coastal geomorphic environment. So from that, the activities of the agent of geomorphic process will have these three. First is erosional activities, and then the transport activities, and the deposition activities. So actually it started with the weathering process. So before these three process, the initial one is the weathering process. As I have said, the material is initially detached from the original material, or separated or altered. Okay, so here we can further see here the activities and the results. Okay, so the activities, the erosional activities, it will cause an erosional landform features, especially in landslides. Okay, and then it will transport. So once the material will go down, it will be transported through some geological agents such as wind, rivers, glaciers, and the bodies of running water. And then the deposition activities, meaning will the material will just be settled on a permanent or a semi-permanent location, and that will result to a depositional landform features. Okay, so yan, these are actually sand bar dunes. And then the wave activities, we have also the effect of that one that was discussed before. Mga glaciers, yung the formation of moraines, and the river activities will form streams and reef valleys. So again, let us note that the denudation process is part of the surface process or the exogenetic process. So it composes of the three activities: the weathering, erosion, and transportation. So yeah, exogenetic is within the surface, endogenetic are within the activities beneath. Okay. So we are going to discuss this now from 2 to 5. We have the erosion, degradation, transportation, deposition or aggradation, and then the mass movement. So denudation, it means to make things exposed. So of course, it is broken into pieces from the weathering, and then the physical forces or through the geologic agents, it will be transported elsewhere, and then it will settle to certain location. So that is denudation. It is actually the combination of the three: weathering, erosion, and transportation. So why weathering? We have already discussed the exposure to chemicals, the exposure to temperature, the exposure to pressure, the exposure to acid rain. Okay. Here we can see that from the unit material, it will be separated or it could be multiplied, and then it will broken into pieces until it will form into sediments. So that is actually the form of weathering. So galing siya sa isa, magiging tatlo, magiging anim, then it will multiply or broken down into smaller pieces. Of course, we have already discussed this weathering process. So we have here ice wedging. Okay, so that is because of the variation in the temperature. Meron din tayo ditong sheeting or unloading, di ba? So that is because of the change in pressure. And we also have the physical, okay, physical weathering. So even the rocks are dislodged by animals, but the rocks weathered this way are not transported elsewhere. Okay, so erosion is actually caused by the gravity. So erosion and transportation are accomplished together. Why? Because of these agents, river, wind, glaciers, ocean currents. So those are agents that will tend to move or transport elsewhere this material. Okay, you can see here. So if we have a stream, okay, stream, flowing water, no, what would be the tendency? Ito, when there will be a flow here, there will be a tendency that some of the material will come up here. Okay, and if we have an erosion going down, the material will go down. Okay, so originally, if we have here an erosion, a continuous erosion over time, this will flatten. Okay, this will flatten, and because of stream, some of the material will go up on sides, and of course may excavate yung gitna niyan. Okay, so that is about erosions from the detachment and then transport to deposition. So weathering versus erosion. So to distinguish these two, of course, yung disintegration sinasabi natin because of weathering, there are three: physical, chemical, and biological. As I have said, the keyword here is the detachment or the decaying, or it could be disintegration. Okay? While that erosion, yung mga na-disintegrate, yun yung mag-erode. Okay? So, the keyword here is transported. Okay? Ano yung na-transport? Yung mga na-detach from weathering. Okay. The specific term, degradation, is defined as the lowering of a bottomland surface through the process of erosion. So, yun yung sinasabi ko kanina, galing yan sa taas or sloping material, of course, because of gravity. So, from weathering, madidetach yung it will weaken the material from the slope and it will go down. So, conceptually, it is the opposite of the vertical component of aggradation and is most frequently applied to sediment removed from a channel bed or other low-lying parts of stream channel. Okay. Ito yung degradation. Bumababa yung material. So, ang aggradation naman is yun. Tumataas yung material. So, aggradation is the raising or elevating of a bottomland surface through the process of alluvial deposition. So, conceptually, it is the vertical component of accretion. It is most frequently applied to sediment deposition on a channel bed. Okay? Sabi nga kanina sa channel bed, because of the streams, tataas yung mga material sa gilid, as I have been explaining a while ago. Okay? So, near channel surfaces, floodplain, or less often low-lying alluvial terrace. Okay, so for deposition is the constructive process of accumulation into beds or irregular masses of loose sediments or other rock material by any natural agent. Yun, parang may compare siya sa dump truck, Ito yung transporting agent. But in reality, yung transporting agent natin could be the geologic agents like water, wind, glaciers, and then there will be a certain time that it would settle to a certain location. So that is actually the deposition. And then the process of sedimentation. Sabi nga natin, nag-originate yung mga material or fine material from a bigger material, Okay. So it is the process by which the sediment is mechanically deposited from suspension within a fluid. So remember the explanation of materials na nalubog or submerged into running stream, that was explained last time. Meron tayong tinatawag na abrasion. Okay? And that from abrasion, because those material are continually rolling because of the current, there will be a friction, and then it will turn to sediments. Okay, so the same true with the sea sands. Yung mga sea sands kasi nanggaling yan sa quartz. Okay, and eventually because of solution, okay, yung solution, yun yung pagkatunaw ng ibang minerals, it had broken into pieces and eventually turning into more sugar size material na tinatawag nating sand. Okay, so that is because of sedimentation. And then for the mass movement or mass wasting, so ito simple, sa downslope transfer through gravitational and generally water facilitated, or it is rain induced, pwedeng rain induced kung may presence of the spring, that will tend to weaken the slope material and have a landslide. Okay, so mass movement could be shallow or mababaw lang, or it could be also deep-seated in nature. Okay, so meron mga types of failure yan. It could be creeping, meaning matagal siya. It would take time to slide, and we have also instantaneous slow failure. So there are a lot of cases that really hampered communities because of that instantaneous slope failure. Okay, so on the screen you can see the endogenetic process, the folding, volcanism, and earthquake. So kasama na dyan yung landslide and the diastrophism, as well as metamorphism. So I think that ends our lecture on that geomorphological process. So as a summary, you can see here that geomorphic process is simply land-forming processes. So it could be sudden change. So when we have sudden change, of course, it is caused by earthquake, volcanism, or it could be also landslide. Those are sudden changes. And then slow and sudden changes could be diastrophism, or the plate movements underneath. And then the slow changes, to matagal-tagal to, yung mga denudation and deposition process, the weathering, erosion, and transportation. So this time you're going to access what I'm going to upload in your Google Class, a video lecture link for formation of valley and formation of river. So with this, thank you for listening, and have a good day.